Greetings YouTube, I have another budget-priced folding knife review for you today. This is made by Coast, right? And it is sold, well, it was originally sold at Smoky Mountain Knife Works, right? And it was around $30 or less. They're currently sold out, but they do sell it on Amazon for a little bit more at the moment. And the name of the knife is the FX350 from Coast. And the clip side of the knife, you see, yes, it is a frame lock. Very rare to get a frame lock, at a lower price range, but there it is. Now this handle scale is listed as G10, but I am 99% certain that it is not G10. It doesn't feel anything like G10, right? So it's up in the air what that is. I think it's probably, feels like Zytel to me. You see the thumb studs, they are stepped, dual thumb studs as your openers. See the construction here, open pillar, and because of the frame lock, it's a little bit thinner, right, than the equivalent liner lock would be. How does it open? Opens very well. For a frame lock, I have no problem. The ergonomics are right. You see the pocket clip prevents you from accidentally pushing on the lock bar, so super smooth for a frame lock. The lockup is also very good. It's very solid. You see the thickness of the lock bar there. It does not have any blade play. Very good ergonomics. And the honeycomb texture pattern, reminiscent of the CRKT Hammond Cruiser line, and it gives an excellent grip. And here's the knife open. Now the blade length, 3 3/4 inches, right? And as you can see, full flat grind. It's an extra wide and fairly pointed drop point, and a close-up of that blade shape. I like the blade shape. I agree that it's a very functional design. The blade steel, 9CR17 MOV, right? So it's in that same CR MOV family of lower price stainless steels. As you can see, it also has a protective nitride coating on the blade. As for initial sharpness, it's a lot sharper than you would expect for a budget price range blade, so kudos for the high initial sharpness on this FX350. Now let's talk for a minute about what makes a certain cheap knife good or worth it when most other cheap knives maybe are not. Well, this Coast knife is actually a prime example of an inexpensive knife that has many good features. Number one, most cheap knives you have, they'll typically have a big ass chunky bevel, and it'll be a low bevel. Right, so most cheap knives, they don't give you much grind area to work with at all. And the big ass bevel just adds weight, and it adds friction and interference if you're trying to slice through things, all right? And then it'll be a big ass chunky bevel, and it'll be a really cheap hollow grind, right? So right off the bat, this full flat grind is just much preferable in my mind to the typical chunky low bevel and cheap hollow grind on most inexpensive knives. Point number two, this gives you a frame lock. Most cheaper knives are going to be liner locks, and the liners will be flimsy. This has a lot of benefits because one, it just gives you an overall thinner, less bulky knife. Two, with a frame lock, even if it failed, you're still holding it closed physically, so it's safer. Three, they've done this correctly in that this actually has a solid lockup, right? And, the only thing that could go wrong is if it made it hard to open, but as I said, this opens easier than some liner locks even, and left or right hand. Point number three, this gives you a good grip, both with the texture and the shape. Good ergonomics, jimping in the right places. Has a winning blade shape as well as, the grind that I mentioned. And it actually comes fairly sharp. It's not too big of a deal if a knife comes dull and you can just sharpen it. But a lot of cheap knives, they're not just dull. The geometry is just wrong. So you're not having to sharpen them. You're actually having to reprofile them. And how much time do you want to put into a cheap knife to begin with? This gives you a sharp edge, and the right geometry for slicing through things. So why does the FX350 get airtime from me? Like I said, the frame lock, the smooth opening, the blade shape. Alright, so finally a cheaper knife that is worth reviewing and worth sharing with you. Hope you enjoyed the review. Stay tuned for many more. I'm out.